Hello, and welcome to another episode of Breaking the Underdog Curse. This is Dr. Don MacDonald, your host, and today I have a special guest from way across the ocean. I just recently got to meet her at a seminar we were at Fiji on Fire, and I'd seen her on Facebook, but I hadn't really met her before, and her talk was really inspirational to me. And her name is Dr. Alison Asher. She's a grad from RMIT in 1995, and I think she has kind of an interesting story. She's a coach right now. She's been in practice. She's traveled, done locums. And I think once we get into the story, I think it'll be kind of exciting. So welcome to the call.
Hi, Don.
How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you.
Awesome. So I was wondering if you could just maybe, tell our listeners just a little bit about maybe how you got into chiropractic, and we'll kind of unveil the story as we go.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. So I first started with a really interesting situation where it was probably what so many chiropractors have gone through. I had an incident of some back pain, and I went to a couple of different people, had some physio and did the standard stuff. And I went to an orthopedic surgeon who wanted to do a nice little operation on L4-5 disc. And one of the things that he said in our consult was, whatever you do, don't go to a chiropractor. So,
never do that.
I know. And I was 17 at the time, and I didn't like being told what to do so much. So, and I was doing a science degree at Melbourne Uni, and I went into their med library because there was no Google then, right? So I just looked up chiropractic, and there was one textbook, one book in the whole library on chiropractic. And it was a really cool little book called The Case Against Chiropractic. And it went into some detail about the Wilk case, and it was the most vehement degradation of chiropractic that you could ever see. And It was this crazy, they're this and they're that, and they do this and they do that. It's this tiny little book. So I took it home and had a bit of a look about it. And thought, I want to find out what this chiropractic thing is. So I made an appointment with a guy called Jared Christian in Melbourne, and I showed him the book, and he said, "You got to steal that book from the library." I said, "I'm not going to steal it, but I want to find out about this chiro thing." And that's what started everything. So I think it started because I was told what not to do.
Right. I think I am the same personality style too. Like I don't like it when people are bossing me around. Now, like I always talk about in my book, The Underdog Curse, if you guilt me, you can get me. But if you directly boss me around, that I don't like that.
Yeah, guilt's a powerful little emotion, isn't it?
Yeah, it totally just gets in there a bit. So tell me about your journey then. So you had your undergrad, and then you went to chiropractic school at RMIT.
Yeah.
And that's in Melbourne, right?
In Melbourne, yeah. And so during that course of that, I suppose because the course was, again, they kind of told us what to do sometimes. So that meant that I like to go and find some different things. So I went out into the field a fair bit. And during my fourth year, a girlfriend and I, we did this amazing trip all around from Victoria. We borrowed her mum's fancy BMW, actually, and she was very generous to let us. Uni, she didn't choose that. We drove up through New South Wales and all the way out to Queensland, and we stopped in at a whole bunch of different chiropractic offices on the way. We handpicked them before we went, of people that we wanted to learn stuff from. Yeah. And we ended up here at the Sunshine Coast. That was the last place we came, with Mark Postles, who's now the person I coach with Quest. And then all the way. But we just saw some amazing chiropractors. So by the time we graduated, we kind of knew what we wanted to do. So both of us and another friend, we all started up our own practices straight out of uni. So that was the first bit. We did that for a couple of years, and then I sold out that practice and went to Sydney for a while. I left chiropractic for a period, and I did spinology. So that's for about another 2 years. And then I decided I wanted to come back to chiropractic, maybe do it a little differently to how I'd been doing it before. And that's when I started working as a locum for a few years. So
that's cool. Let's go back. That's interesting, because you just kind of brushed over that when we were at Fiji on Fire, and I was like, yeah, just wait. Let's
wait, what?
let's just expand into that a little bit. So you practiced for 2 years, and like, how did things go in those first 2 years?
It was really cool. Yeah, very straight chiropractic. I suppose by that stage, I really loved the stuff of Joe Strauss and Reggie and that sort of thing. So that was kind of where I was headed, into that very straight chiropractic. We had maybe a lot of membership fees, like not so much pay per visit. It was monthly or yearly fees. So there actually wasn't any per visit fees. So just into that model of performance, it was all about, let's get the most out of your body. So in that practice model, it worked really well, and when we loved it, and it was a really fun place to practice, of course. But then I suppose where it really happened is I had had a lunch with a whole bunch of chiropractors, and we all ran around the table and everyone talked about the way they practiced. And I was kind of confronted by that because I didn't realize where the profession was kind of heading. It was a little bit different from where I wanted to be. And in the follow-up to that, I had a lunch with a girlfriend and I was telling her about all of this different stuff. And I said, they're all wrong. They're wrong. They can't do it that way. Because, of course, I was right.
Yeah.
And she said to me, have you ever considered that you might be the odd one out here, that perhaps you might be wrong, that maybe you're not even a chiropractor? And right in that moment, I went, oh, my goodness, I think she's right. I think that I'm trying to make the profession be something that it doesn't want to be. And so that's when, and I'd already been getting coached with a guy called Anthony Tremaine, who was the person who started up Spinology in Australia. He was our coach when we were chiropractors, and he'd by then left chiropractic himself and doing Spinology. So that's when I decided to go ahead and do that. So I did the course and then went to Sydney and had Spinology practice.
And just for some people who might not know what is Spinology, could you kind of maybe explain what that is if someone's never heard of that before?
Yeah, so I probably can't comment so much on what the state of the profession is right now because I haven't had much to do with Spinology over recent times. But the idea started from Reggie Gold way back when he decided he wanted to straighten up chiropractic, I suppose, and do something that was not so much hand only, spine only, not that old school stuff in terms of but however it was that, but just about not treating any symptoms, conditions or complaints. It was about, we're going to apply some forces, we're going to get out of the way and see what your body does. So it was all about maximizing performance.
Right. And so that had a separate course that you could do on top of chiropractic. Is that how you did it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In Australia, that's been, well, and I'm assuming this is all still in place. Anthony trademarked the term Spinology. So you needed to, so essentially because I think probably he was thinking that he could then keep it how he wanted to be with the purity he wanted because he'd seen chiropractic golf in all the different directions. So by trademarking it was that. And it's an advanced diploma, so it's a 2-year course. So
okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I know I had Reggie Gold here in Edmonton a couple of years before he passed away, and we had a good conversation about how he was having a hard time with the CCE, with the crediting body. So he created his own crediting body, right? Because he said that I'm going to create my own. And he did it in the long term, not just to create a new long-term body, but to get them to actually open up to our form of chiropractic. So, and I think he put a lot of effort into that. And then he finally took it away when they decided they would kind of come along with him. So that was a really interesting story to hear from Reggie, how he helped to get that, because we've always been fighting that, right, in chiropractic, where it's been kind of absorbed into schools and they're trying to medicalize it. And when we all get pushed in with all the other healthcare professions, the challenge is all the other healthcare professions all treat conditions, right? Yeah, and so so it makes it challenging. So when you did it for a couple of years, what was what made you decide to come back into chiropractic?
What had happened was that I think what the difficult part for me is I found it really challenging to shake off all of my chiropractic knowledge, which, as you said, some of it is medical knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So we were very specific with our criteria of what we would do when we accept a practice member into the office. And we changed the terminology. We didn't use the word adjustment anymore because this was definitely a very distinct and separate profession. There were people who weren't chiropractors that were spinologists, right?
Right.
And we didn't use the word subluxation, spinal obtrusion, application of force, all this kind of stuff, right? So very specific, very much this is what it is. And I had a thing happen where an old lady came to see me, and she would have been about maybe mid-80s, very obvious dowager hump, osteoporosis, right?
Yeah.
Straight away, my brain goes there.
Yeah.
And I want to apply forces to her spine. And I can't x-ray as a spinologist because I don't treat conditions or complaints.
Right.
And I asked her about her life and what's been like. And I didn't want to say to her, if you got osteoporosis, but I needed to know. And I assumed she did. And I'm sitting there and she's describing all the stuff that she's going through. And I just wanted to help her.
Yeah.
And I knew that I knew how to help her. And probably in that point, I should have referred her to a chiropractor.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to work her. And perhaps that was my ego sitting in or whatever. And I still had an activator from way back when I was a chiropractor.
Yeah.
And so I used the activator. And I called Anthony straight after and said, I've just had a lady come in. She's got osteoporosis, and I've just used the activator. And some sparks flew. And I said to him, I'm going to leave. I'm going to say you back my practice, and I'm going to hit the road as a chiropractor. So at that point, I realized my desire to help this woman, right or wrong, superseded a philosophical decision. And I was at a crossroads at that point. So I thought, I'm going to go and locum for a while and make a decision about what I'm going to do. You know, it so happened that I'd been spending a fair bit of time reading Ayn Rand stuff, and I was right into objectivist philosophy. And so it was just like, right, okay, I'm at that Atlas Shrugged moment, right? So
yeah, that is cool. So so in just in general in your life, have you always kind of been, have you been like a rebel, or have you been influenced by your external environment, or like just along your personality style? How have you dealt with things? 'Cause that's pretty brave, like, to do what you've done.
I don't know if it's very, very brave. It's just, I tend to say, I look at something and try to say, okay, this is what it looks like right now. I'm going to extrapolate it out and see where this ends up. And then I'm going to make conscious decisions along the way to do that. So, you know, when I started my practice straight out of uni, because that's what we went straight into, people I know were saying, why, you don't know this and you don't know that? And it's like, well, I don't know what I don't know. I'll learn those on the way, but I want to get to here, and this is the road to it. So
I guess the best thing would be you're very good at delaying gratification, because you can see further out in advance, right? So it's probably that you can. You might not think
that if you can see my shoe cupboard, Don. I don't know. There's no delaying gratification going on there, but
hey, we're not like that in all areas of our life, right? So
yeah, right. I don't know. We tend to coach and say that if you do it in one area, you do it in some others, but I don't know. But anyway, I don't think but rebel, no. In fact, you wouldn't think that to look at me at all. You know, at school, I was definitely the kid who I think did what I was told to do, definitely. And the school model definitely suited my style of thinking, where you go, okay, well, this is what it needs, and this is what I'll need to do to pass that exam and that kind of stuff. So I don't know if it looks rebellious, but I think I'm fairly self-full. You know, it's not, some people call it selfish, and I think that I'm pretty clear on, okay, this is what works for me. And if I look after me, I can look after the guy I love. And if we can, you know, and then if Nathan and I call, then we're available for kids. So it tends to be a little bit of that, if that makes sense.
And how did you learn that? Did you learn that growing up, or how did you, because that's something that I think a lot of people strive to get to, because they're selfless, but then they're empty, and then they have a hard time serving others because they haven't worked on themselves. So where do you think you might have learned that, or decided that?
Yeah, I've got a really strong role model in my mum. My parents separated when I was about maybe 4 years old, and I had twin brothers who were maybe about 6 months old at the time. I'm a bit sketchy on the dates, but something like that. And my mum definitely stood on her own 2 feet. She never asked for help. In fact, I don't think she told anyone that he'd left for maybe a couple of months. You know, just got on with things. So very much of stiff upper lip and let's get moving. And she definitely taught me that you can do anything that you want to do, but it comes at a cost. And so you just got to figure out if you want it badly enough. So the why is really important in our family. Like, why would you want that? Get really clear on it, and then you can do the things that you think that you want. But if your why is not big enough, then you tend to fall off. Yeah. So I think that maybe that would be the starting point. And then I ran about, maybe when I was in chiropractic college, and I remember I went to some meditation classes, and one of the teachers there, she said to, she quoted something that she says is from the Bible. I don't know where it is. I haven't read the Bible. But she said, heal thyself, physician. And I remember thinking at that time, if I'm going to put everything into my practice members and not look after me, then I'm not going to be any good to anyone. So it's the old oxygen mask thing. Who do you put it on first? Right. So I think those things adding together, and for people who were probably, I thought were powerful and I suppose exemplary women, reminded me of that. Because once you become a mum, there's a real tendency to not do that, to put the children first. And
I see that lots with practice members. Huge. Yeah. And then they're just overwhelmed, right? They're just hanging on like for dear life.
Yeah. And because they're not filling themselves up. And we've got a daughter who's got a condition where she gets regular blood transfusions. So I suppose you could call it a chronic condition in some ways. And the stats on that for marriage aren't great once you have a kid who's got a thing, you know, in terms of separation. And so when we realised we had that, Nathan and I sat down, I said, well, now we've got to be really careful that we look after us. And that means us both looking after ourselves independently and then together, and then we can look after these kids.
That would make sense too, because if you have a child that needs extra care, attention will be drawn away from the relationship, and then the relationship becomes secondary. That's very interesting. So what kind of things did you do to kind of make sure you guys stayed on the ball with that? Because it's tough, because it's also, you're in practice too. So there's lots of chiropractors out there that have maybe children in practice and all that kind of stuff, and maybe you give good advice for that.
I think for us, first of all, it's just that checking in procedure, with, I think so often in life, the issues that we face are down to procedure. It's around, you don't have a procedure about assessing what's big for you, what's important, what your big why is, and in Quest, we call that our quadrant 1, right? That big why, what am I doing? And then the next thing that comes from that is, well, how are you going to do that? What's the process for it? And so we have things that we check in with each other and check in with ourselves to make sure that we're still on task, and still doing what it is that we want to do. And then we go into the quadrant 3, which is about our relationship and our rapport and being able to look after the people around us. And then you get to that 4 that I was talking about, because my quadrants that I preference in are 1, 4. So that was that thing when you said, how did you do that? Well, it's because I get the big idea and then just want to get there. And that's and quadrant 4 is about getting it done. So we do things where we separate, but then we come back together. But we also have Team Asher, and so we talk about being on the team.
Yeah,
and we're a bit lame, but when the kids were little, we didn't have a little song. And so, but it would be this thing where if we're going to go into a shop, I'd say to the kids, okay, so we're about to go in the shop. What do Team Asher do in shops? And the kids would say, we don't touch stuff. And I'd say, great, we can look with our eyes. And then if you see other kids doing it, that's because that's what those other teams do. But Team Asher, this is what we do.
That's awesome.
So maybe it's a bit about that, not rebel thing that you were saying before, but being okay with how we do stuff.
Totally. And I think
other people.
Yeah, and I think that's just, again, if you see, and again, as me, a recovering people pleaser, always still kind of when Brandy would always say that too. Brandy's really direct, right? Brandy will just tell people what they think, and then it looks like a rebel because you're actually just being authentic. When some people pleasers are so used to dancing around the issue all the time. So I think that is that's pretty cool, because then also for the kids, you make it like a fun game rather than saying don't touch things and and telling all the rules.
Yeah, and you go, Team Asher. But sometimes we get off team, you know, and I'm probably the one who might do it the most too, where I might be walking around the house going, I do everything around here or whatever, and looking for, proof of that. And then you sit and go, hang on a minute, I'm on the team. I'm off the team. So if you want to be on the team, do the training. Get back to procedure, do the things that you know that fill you up, and then get back on the team.
That's awesome. That's cool.
So, yeah, I like teams.
I know. Well, it's fun because it's connection, right? That's one of that's the human needs that we all kind of strive for. And connection, that's what we talk about in chiropractic, right? It's all about connection. That's how we can evolve in our environment. So that's awesome. So you do spinology, and then you go back into the profession, and then you just traveled the country, right? Locuming?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so I just sent out a whole bunch of letters to a whole bunch of chiropractors and said, I'm locuming now. And, it was really lovely. And when we talk about connection, chiropractors are so great at that. And I think that for me, a lot of people would have known that I went and did spinology and had left the profession per se. And yet still I was offered work, which was quite stunning in and of itself. And so I went into a whole bunch of practices, and it was really fun to be able to see it from the outside in, and as well as the inside out, because people have a real tendency to tell you the fluffy, nice stuff about their practice, but when you get in there, you really see it. And it can be really confronting, especially with, with my background, knowing that I was coming in from that straight way. That might have been funny for some people. However, they were amazing. And so at that time, Nathan and I got together, and he'd just broken his neck.
Oh, gee.
So had an unstable fracture. So he was in a collar, and he had a couple of surgeries. And so he travelled around with me. And so we really got to go around to all these different places and have a lot of fun. And we kept on coming back to this Sunshine Coast place. And I saw Mark at a seminar and said, I need a job with you next year. And he rang me the next week and said, I've got one now. So we moved up here and have never moved since. So
that's
the longest
awesome.
I've ever been anyway.
Yeah, no. So you started working for Mark then?
Yeah, down at the practice at Kawana. Yeah.
That's awesome. And how long ago was that you started working with him?
2001. And
cool.
And then after having Coco, so that's my daughter who has the thing, in 2007, what I was realizing is that with transfusion, sometimes we didn't have a lot of indication about when it was going to happen. And we were cancelling a whole lot of people. The girls were really busy with rescheduling appointments for me and all that sort of stuff. So I went, I've got to bring this home. And, you're talking about that connection stuff, about reconnecting man the physical with man the spiritual. Sometimes you got to do that with your team. And so we brought it all in, and now I work in this tiny little space here, and just me seeing the people.
That's awesome. So you have your own practice in your house?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
My husband's a carpenter. It's just converted a little room downstairs for us, and people come in the sideway. It's a really lovely little space, got a little water feature and stuff like that. So, and that's about being close to the team, having knowing what's going on in the house and that sort of thing. So even though it's completely separate, it's got that feeling of I'm aware of where we're at. So it's and you talk a little bit about doing what's right for you, and that's what that became. It's like, well, I really need and want and would love to be with my people, and so this is where we're going to do it. And so I don't know if you can see behind you, but my little tagline in my practice says, "For everyone you love." You probably can't read it on the beach.
I can't see it, but I can see it, but I just can't read it.
It's for everyone you love. And so the people who come here, they're part of my extended family, and so that's why the home-based practice is really appropriate for the way, again, I'd like the big idea first. We set up the practice, the purpose statement. What do we want this to be about? And then we create the physical space that actually is a manifestation of that.
That's pretty inspiring, because I know we talked to quite a few chiropractors that might not be in, there are several stages of practice. So like they might be at the beginning where they're just plateaued and they're having a hard time getting their feet off the ground, or people who have actually kind of grown their practice, but they haven't really learned how to get the balance or line up with their values, and they're getting burnt out. Yeah. And so what kind of advice would you have for someone? Like, 'cause it's pretty cool that you usually can, you can kind of identify something's maybe not working for you pretty quickly, and then do a direction change. What kind of advice would you have for someone out there that might just be kind of, they're feeling that burnt out energy because there's just probably something that's just not working in their life and their own practice?
Yeah. They've got to go within. They've got to tell the truth, and not the seminar answer, not the one that suits other people, but go right within. And there's processes to do that, and from your book, Don, you got to go within. You got to go and figure out what it is that really is your true bliss. And I'm not talking about, live every day as if your last kind of stuff. I'm talking about, what do you really want? Tell the truth. And the thing that I see more often than not, and especially you see this in coaching, but in practice as well, people are living out some life that's not even theirs, They only got one shot at it. We're here for a couple of minutes, it feels like sometimes. And so it's all about saying, well, what do you really want? And once you know that, and that means assessing your values, that means diving in deep and really answering, not so much the tricky questions, but just being truthful. And asking yourself again and again till you really get to that core. And I think for me, writing, journaling is really where it comes out for me. But there's other processes that you can do, but to get to the very core of that, and then set up some processes around that. I don't mean goal setting, because sometimes that can be a real emptiness. Say I want to set up a practice and see 500 a week, and then you get there and then 500 a week, big deal. It's about that process and enjoying every step of the way. My little boy, he met, Chris Hadfield, the Canadian astronaut.
Yeah.
Well, so Liam met Chris Hadfield a couple of years back, 2 years back, and we got him for his birthday because he wants to be an astronaut. And that's my now 13-year-old. And he said to Chris, what does it take for me to be an astronaut? And he said, look, mate, you can Google that. You're a smart kid. I'm sure you can figure out what the steps are. He said, but what I would suggest is that you make sure that you love every step along the way. And then if you get to be an astronaut, that's cool. But if not, you've still had a really good life.
Right. It's not all based on the end game.
Not on the end point stuff. And so even though I talked before about getting to the quadrant 4 and how I'm sometimes in a rush to get there, but it's making sure that all those steps along the way are things that you love to do.
Right.
And so what will this practice become? I don't know. As the kids age, I imagine that, maybe we'll take it out of this space and maybe go back to a more traditional model. Maybe I'll have some associates. I'm not sure. But at this point, this is what works and we love it this way.
That's awesome. I love that about it's working for the moment, and then next year it might be something different and working for the moment. And the cool thing about chiropractic in general is you can do that. You can do whatever you want. And
so many choices, right?
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So part of the underdog curse is mindset stuff, which we've kind of talked a little bit about that with kind of worrying about what everybody else thinks and living in what other people's ideas are of you, or losing yourself to your family or friends. The other part is just skills, right? And so sometimes you're an underdog because you just don't have the skills. And I really loved your talk at Fiji on Fire, and when you talked about rapport, and they had that cool video at the beginning. And I was wondering if you could just kind of maybe just have like 5-10 minutes just to kind of go over kind of the Coles notes of that talk and what kind of inspired it, because I think that is such a huge thing for us to initiate with our practice members off the bat, and it makes everything easier when we have rapport. And so tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so with that talk of Fiji, what I was focused on there was the quadrant 3, which is that rapport and relationship building and connection, really.
Yeah.
And that's from the Brene Brown stuff. When you read about that, you go, oh my goodness, of course, this is a biological urge. Of course, if we're excluded by our tribe, then, on a primitive level, we would have been dead, right? So
yeah, totally.
So that desire for connection is really big. And I think that sometimes we almost deny that to some degree. We pretend that we're an island and we don't need other people. And yet there's this constant desire somewhere back within us to connect. And so in rapport, I think that mostly it just comes back to truth, about being able to sit in your own truth. And whatever it is that you're going to say to that person in front of you, you tell it with your true heart. And I hide behind this little thing that Alison, apparently the name Alison means little truthful one. So I use that as an excuse for often telling the truth, when even Nathan, my husband, will say, did you mean to say that out loud? I was like, yeah, well, I'm a little truthful one. What can I say? So I think that that's what I like to do when people walk through into my space here, is I want to be able to communicate with them and make sure that I tell them the truth as I see it. I'm not saying it's always right or correct, but it's the best that I know how to do. And so in terms of rapport, the video that we showed, that was that really powerful one by Darren Brown, was the mirroring. So that's part of rapport. That's about that very physical thing. And I think that probably because of NLP and some of the things that you hear, it's often seen as being something that's almost salesy and manipulative.
Right.
It's like, oh, I wouldn't want to do that, and it's almost like, oh, somebody's doing this, so I'll do it as well. Well, you just look like a bit of a wanker if you do that, really. I mean, because that's not really what rapport is. This is about actually making connection with someone heart to heart. And so the way, with a practice member, for example, the way I would first build in actual physical rapport with them is when you're doing your assessment. So we're taking a history, and maybe they've got some antalgia or something like that, and I'll say, I'm just going to copy you. I'm just going to do what you're doing. So, Don, I can see that your right shoulder's a little, this side, sorry, my right shoulder's a little high. So I'm just going to do that as well. I'm just going to see how that feels. All right, I can feel some tension there in my lower back when I do that. That's interesting. So just actually getting into it. And I say, let's breathe together, actually. Breathe in and breathe out. So we've actually manipulated rapport to some degree. So I haven't done it surreptitiously and tried to, be weird about it.
Right.
Stated, I'm going to copy you. I'm just going to see what it feels like to be in your body for a minute. You know what I mean? And so then that takes away some of that weirdness.
Yeah, well, and I like that too, because then you actually ask them to you ask them to mirror you. So let's take a deep breath in. Now you're leading, so you can kind of go back and forth, right?
Pace, lead, right?
Yeah.
And so and that's sometimes about what, if we want to give the opportunity for someone to be able to have lifetime chiropractic care, then it's going to involve a fair bit of that. It's going to involve some pacing and let's get in this together. Let's hold hands, because we're often coming from a very different perspective. And I would say in my early years in practice, that is probably what I didn't do very well. I didn't pace at all. In fact, I almost interviewed people on that first visit to see whether or not they were appropriate for my office, and if they only wanted performance-based, and otherwise they could get out of here, because you can only come with me if you already want this.
Right.
And we're coming from different models of the world.
Yep.
And so we've got to meet their model. And my friend Sam uses a really cool example where she talks about a stairway. And she says that when people come in, they're sitting at the bottom of the stairs. And we're at the top going, come up here, there's optimum function up here, and you can have lifetime chiropractic. They're just like, look at the headache.
Right.
And they're so luxated, and they can't even make great decisions, right?
Their brain doesn't even work. Yeah.
But we're telling them about all of this stuff, and we do a chiropractic vomit on them. We're not in rapport. We're just saying all of this stuff, and they're like, I've just got a headache or a backache or whatever it is. So we're going to go down the stairs, and we've got to hold their hand and meet their model of the world. and pace with them. Say, yeah, I get it. Yep. And I can feel it. Well, I've done your posture as well. I can see what you're talking about. Okay. We're going to do some tests here, and we're going to do some things and figure out what might be going on. And we're going to be thorough, and we're going to really look after that. And so let's go up one step together. Let's hold hands and take up one step. And then we're going to do some other stuff, and it's going to be fascinating to see what happens here. Can't wait to see what's going to happen with your spine. And, in a couple of years, we'll look back at this and we won't even remember what this back pain was like, but let's go up another step together. Right. And so you're doing some future pacing there, and it's not being manipulative. It's just giving them an opportunity. And people can choose or not choose to come on the trip.
Right.
They can say, you know what, I'm staying here. I don't want to go up there. That's okay.
Yeah. But most people I know that we talk to, no one's ever talked to them like that before. So they never even knew that was possible. And that's actually creating hope. That future pacing is actually creating hope, which people have never had. Right.
So powerful. And people come into us, and you know what they're like. Their adrenals are shot, and they're in that sympathetic overdrive, and they just need some parasympathetic sometimes. We just need to calm that system down, and rapport is a way of doing that. And I find it really powerful because, like you said, we get into their model, we understand a little bit what, look at their stresses, look at their life. When's the last time they did something for themselves? You ask maybe men as well, but in particular, ask a woman, what do they need? Yeah. What's something that they can do? One thing you could do today that could fill you up. And I'll say something about someone else. You go, no, something for you. And they burst into tears. Yeah. Because they don't even know anymore.
That's the crazy when they don't even know what they would love to do, because they never asked that. I always say the what do I love muscle has atrophied.
Yeah, so much, right? Yeah. And then all that, what does everyone else love muscle?
Yeah.
And that's okay too. That could be part of it. Helping other people to be happy could be part of what it is that you love. That's fine. There are helpers out there, right? There are people who love to do that. I mean, we're chiropractors. We got into this for some kind of reason.
Yeah.
And also, is there something that you could do that's just for you? Is that a possibility? Mm-hmm. And sometimes that possibility hasn't even been explored.
Right.
So it's about getting there. And like you said, and then we get the opportunity where we can pace a little bit and bring them to understand our model of the world as well. And so those two things can do a beautiful dance together, in and out, not always exactly at the same time. But I would suggest that oftentimes when people don't choose to be their best, which is one of the things that we offer, that idea of optimum function or performance, it's probably insufficient pacing. We've probably gotten out of rapport with them somewhere. Yeah. And we've lost them. And that's an unfortunate thing.
And it's funny, I just had a question about this just recently with a new grad saying, how do we start the rapport process? I know if they've always been just getting to the problem and then solving it without taking that time, you've talked about a little bit of mirroring stuff. What does a chiropractor have to go through in their mind to get into that set?
In their mind, I suppose... In mind, I just set intentions, I suppose just sit there and say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be in rapport unless I choose to break it. Because sometimes it's useful to break rapport, right?
Right.
Sometimes you want to shock people. Like I might be, just say a mum's coming in with, and they've brought one kid, but there's 3 other kids sitting out there that haven't been checked. And I'll say, oh, so is this your favourite one? And they'll say, what? I say, is this the one you love the most? Because you're like, this is the one that you're getting checked, but you're not worried about the others. You put your money on this one. Oh, that's a bit of a rapport breaker. And yet, if we're in rapport, we can have those conversations. And that's one of the things that I love about watching you and Brandy, some of the things that I see on Facebook, is that you get away with a lot of stuff, a lot of truth bombs, because you're in rapport. Without rapport, don't even bother with that, because otherwise you're just going to alienate the population 100%. And yourself. So it's got to come with that first. And so I think there's probably a choice to say that I want to do that and I want to go there and I want to be in rapport with these people. I want to understand what it is that they may be experiencing, and knowing what you're about as well. If you know really what your values are and what you stand for, then I think that probably helps, because you're looking for that in them. So when someone comes in, the way they present themselves, the things that they tell you about when you're doing your history, say, so tell me how this affects your life. They're telling you what their values are.
Right.
And so being able to evaluate that, and I do it.
Sorry, dog. Hey, Lux.
That's good that it's Lux. I was so worried. We've got 2 little puffballs in this house, 2 little
No, it's
little dogs.
our dog here, so yeah, he does
They haven't got
directly.
they haven't got a loud voice like Lux, but I was thinking, I hope they don't bark during this.
Yeah, everybody just excused Lux. He
Yeah,
saw the wind blow and thought it was all scary, so it's all good. Sorry about that.
I thought, I'm the master of the wind, I must bark at it.
Yeah.
It's about understanding where people's values lie. And that's, I think, really a powerful thing about rapport, because then what we do is that we build chiropractic into their lives. So it's about linking things. And we play this linking game. I don't know if you played it at college, but where you might say, okay, so link chiropractic to this cup.
Yeah.
And then you play the link, right?
Yeah.
And the more you practice that and get good at that, you can link anything with anything. And so then what we can do is that we can link things for our practice members, where we build a situation where chiropractic is not just linked to whether or not you've got a backache. It's linked to this and to that and to all these different areas of their life. And then they can make great choices based on that.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing, because chiropractic is it's a principle. And that's why it's so, you can link it to anything when you really understand it.
Yep. And so I think that rapport thing is, the first thing is in the conversation that you have during the history too. I don't write anything. I just stand there. They sit on the adjusting table and I just stand there and listen. And so we have a conversation. It's not me ticking boxes. You must master that first. Like you mentioned, a new grade, you've got to know how to take a proper history. You've got to know what your screening tests are going to be and blah, blah, blah. You need to know that like that. Right. So you skill and drill that. That's procedural, right? You got to do that and do that and do that. And then you can actually just stand and listen, and you can mesh that seamlessly in. Like sometimes you're starting to do some testing before you've even gotten to that part of the exam, because you know how to do it.
Yeah, totally.
So that's about being able to, what's that statement? You can't tell the difference when a master. You can't tell the difference when they're working and when they're playing. So I think that's maybe that thing about having integrity around that. If you're always being you, then the you that you meet at a seminar is the you that you would meet at the shops.
Right. You have that the authenticity.
Yeah, and I think that probably our people know that. They know that when we're doing a number on them, don't they? People know. So you got to tell the truth. And I think that there's that thing too. If you're not telling the truth on something, people will assume a default position which would be the lowest common denominator. So let's just say that you're trying to say something like, just say you don't believe in lifetime chiropractic care, but you're just saying the words to someone. They know you're not telling the truth, but they don't know why. So they think it's a sales job.
Right.
So you got to own it. Whatever it is that you're going to do in practice, you must own it.
When I find it's easier then too, because when you're not owning it, it takes so many of those bars on your cell phone. It takes so much energy that you're more likely to get exhausted.
Yep. Because you're just saying stuff that's not really true for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I suppose that's probably where this all comes from. And, when we were talking rapport before, you said that you found it interesting, that idea of tissue rapport. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how that's come into my head. And I think that maybe Travis Wild might have told me about it. And he did, he's a friend of mine who did a lot of network stuff. So it's probably from Donnie Epstein. But He talks a lot about, and I don't know whether or Trav invented it, but the idea of tissue rapport is that, if you imagine our hands together, if just say this hand, this is me, if I can overpower you, right? And so that's what sometimes happens when people apply forces to the spine, they overpower, right? And it hurts. And then the other way too is that if the practice member, this one over here, is resisting so much the thing that we're about to do, we get overpowered. And we know what that feels like. That's when you're a student, you bounce off almost, don't you, right? And
it's like a brick wall. Boom.
You go, right, well, that was... But when you're in rapport, there's pressure from both. We're both exerting, we're aware of the sense of each other. However, no one's trying to overpower each other. And if we get into tissue rapport and palpation, then when it comes to the time when we apply the force, then it's seamless. Mm-hmm. And I remember getting adjusted with Reggie Gold way back when, around about those Spinology days. And he did this thing where he just felt down my spine like this. And then it was like, apply. And I've never quite known anything like it. And that was someone who'd mastered tissue rapport, in my opinion.
That is so cool.
Happened like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just that light. I can tell that too now when I'm working on people. You can just feel down the spine, and you just know.
Yep.
Yeah, you just know.
And if you don't do it, then it's ineffective. That's when you feel back afterwards and you go, oh, okay, that wasn't one of it. And it's not about cavitation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that change in the tissue that when you palpate afterwards, you go, yeah, there's the ease. That's what I was after. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you very much for being on the call. We just want to end the call usually with you just giving a couple of minutes of what your thoughts would like to be out to the planet and out to the world. And we like to give the floor to our guests for a couple of minutes and just tell us what's on your mind.
Oh, what's on my mind? Okay. That's pretty empty, Don. I don't know. We've got a lot in there. I'm a simple girl. All right. Well, I'll tell you.
Well, it's very random.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just like, oh, okay, where am I going to get that from? Tell the truth. Tell the truth to yourself. Take the time to figure out what your truth is if you don't know. Get that going first, because your values are going to drive the things that you do, your actions, and then that's going to lead to our results, basically. So go within that, first of all. Do whatever it takes. Find the people who can help you do that. And if you tell your truth and live true to your story, then you have a wonderful life. Mm-hmm. I think that's about it. I don't know if I've got anything else outside of that. I think that's pretty much what it's all about.
That's probably, there's a lot of work to get to that point. So I think that's amazing. So thanks very much for being on the podcast. I appreciate
You're welcome. It's been lovely speaking with you.
And everyone out there, I'm sure we've covered lots of stuff today. You can implement that in your practice, implement it into your mind. There's lots of stuff going on. And until next time, crush the curse.